Hi, welcome. Sorry for the delay in starting the webinar. We just had a few technical hitches, but welcome everyone, and nice to see familiar names joining. So welcome to the Enterprise Excellence Network webinar series together today with Mark DeLuzio and chaired by Professor Peter Hines. So today Mark will be giving an executive overview on the Danaher business system versus the Toyota production system. Just a bit about the Enterprise Excellence Network. I know some of you are familiar and are some of the members, but we are a senior hub for senior lean leaders based in Europe. It's led by Professor Peter Hines, where we have workshops which are now adapted, and we're running these virtually. And they're also collaborated with best practice host sites, so we learn from them and their Enterprise Excellence Network journey. So today the format, there'll be a 30-minute presentation by Mark, followed by a 30-minute Q&A session at the end. So please feel free to type your questions into the questions tab for Mark then. Okay, so I'll now hand over to Professor Peter Hines just to introduce Mark a bit more, and I'll speak to you at the end. Enjoy, thank you.
Thanks, Emma, and again, sorry if we slight delay there. And welcome to this this session of the our webinar series. So I'm very pleased to welcome Mark to our session, and Mark it's looking very dark behind him because it's 6 o'clock in the morning over there in Arizona, probably a lot warmer than it is here in Europe. And I think Mark is one of those characters who've had a defining impact on lean and enterprise excellence during the journey. So earlier in his career, when he was working at Danaher, he was instrumental in the development of the Danaher business system. And so he's going to use this opportunity to share and compare that with the Toyota production system. So I think we're all looking forward very much to this session. So Mark will talk for sort of half an hour, just over, something like that. Then we'll have a chance to do a Q&A. So if you want to post any questions during the talk, at the end of the talk, I'll read them out and compare that session. So with that, let me pass on to you, Mark.
Thanks, Peter. Hey, thanks for having me. I really appreciate you getting me up so early. No, I'm only kidding. I'm up early anyway, so it doesn't really matter. I kidded around with Peter a little bit. I said, I'm just getting back from lunch, so, you know, but it is here in Arizona. It is dark right now, and it's getting cooler, believe it or not. In Fahrenheit anyway, yesterday it was 95 or 100, so that's cool for us. You know what I thought I'd do, Peter, is talk a little bit about, you know, a little bit about the Danaher business system. But, you know, I think one of the things that I always found helpful is not always to talk about the successes, but talk about the errors that we made in actually creating the Danaher business system, because I think that gives you some insight. In the book that I wrote called Flatlined kind of highlights some of the key errors that I continue to see over and over and over again in all kinds of different transformations in all kinds of different businesses and industries. So I just want to talk about a couple of the errors. This presentation is a little bit longer than a half an hour, so I'm not going to, you know, take you through everything on this, but I'm going to try to keep this centered more towards how this thing got started with Danaher and actually the modern lean movement in the United States and maybe the world, if you will, started with this company called Jake Brake in Bloomfield, Connecticut, which is, I happen to be there at the time, luckily. Art Byrne and George Konitsaker were running that. Art and George hired me. And anyway, to make a long story short, that was the spark where a lot of this started, and it gave rise to what we now call the Danaher business system. So, and I was later tapped to do this for the whole corporation because we had such success at the Jake Brake division of Danaher. So I want to talk a little bit about the Danaher business system and the relationship to the Toyota production system. So let me take you through some of this. And, you know, first thing is, now this is a slide that's sort of a dated slide. It's circa 2000, so it's quite old, 20 years old. They don't use this slide anymore, but this is what we had as the Danaher business system around that time, okay? And you can see it's very manufacturing oriented, right? It has a lot of, you know, a lot of those are just symbolic tools on the bottom of the steps, if you will. But one of the key things that made this a system was the fact
Mark,
that, yes.
It's Peter again. We're still seeing the front slide. It hasn't paged on.
Oh, I'm sorry. I am advancing it.
That's good. That's good. It's there
How
now.
about now? Can you see it now? Okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was on my screen. I just don't know why it didn't communicate. I don't know. So this slide, you're looking at the Danaher Business System house, and again, the tools down below are sort of just symbolic. There were a lot more tools than that, but anyway, the real key that made this a business system was our ability to do what we call policy deployment, okay, which I call now strategy deployment. Some people out there might call it Hoshin planning, Hoshin Connery, all kinds of different names for it. But we wanted to align our lean transformation efforts with our objectives, our strategic objectives. And that's what this was all about. So again, I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on this right now, but this system evolved into an enterprise system, which I think maybe is one of the key differences maybe between the Toyota production system and the Danaher business system, except for the Toyota production system is a way of thinking as well as a set of tools and all the, you know, more tactical things that you might be doing with that. But it is a set philosophy. And so the fundamental principles of the Toyota production system were resonant at Danaher in when we created the Danaher business system. Okay, so that's one thing that did not change. The fundamental philosophies of, you know, just in time, value added, non-value added, focus on the customer. You know, respect for people came out a little bit later, and quite frankly, we were always good at that at the beginning. And so you're never really good at it, quite frankly, because it's always something they have to continue, and I'll talk about that later. But this was the original one. Now, we brought over a group called Shingo, and they were the direct lieutenants of Takashi Ono, and we were the first ones to use them at Jake Break. And Nakao and Iwata were my two main mentors, and they ran that group. And they were direct disciples of Takashi Ono. Unfortunately, Mr. Iwata passed away quite a few years ago. I got to see him just 2 months before he died, and Nakao I just saw a couple years ago, but he's still out there and doing his thing. And those guys to me are some of the best mentors I've ever had, in addition to many, many others. But so anyway, we got it right from the horse's mouth, if you will, you know, so we learned it right from them. And it did start out as a manufacturing system. As a matter of fact, we called it the Danaher production system at first and changed it to the Danaher business system because it's an enterprise-wide endeavor. All right, so we did not want to become the best manufacturing company in the world. We wanted to become the best enterprise in the world. That was our objective. Okay, so it wasn't just about manufacturing. As a matter of fact, I will tell you that if you only focus on manufacturing or whatever operations you have, you will not, you know, self-actualize, if you will, as a great company, because you have to look at the whole synergistic approach of all your functions, not just, you know, one like engineering or manufacturing or what have you. Okay. You can see how it grows. This is just a toolkit. And by the way, again, this is not just about tools. Okay. I mean, everybody wants to focus on the tools, but I had the opportunity to have two houses, you know, one built really well and one not built so well, and they all use the same tools. Okay, so what's the difference, right? The difference, of course, is people. Okay, so one thing to think about, and this is sometimes hard for engineers, is that lean is a people game. It is not a tool game. Yeah, you have to be really good at the tools, don't get me wrong. But if you miss on the people part and the respect for people part, you won't do it. Okay, so the tools are only there as implements to improve your operations and what have you, but it's all about people at the end of the day. Okay, so you can see that this went into growth, into, you know, commercial side of the business, administratively, it went into the leadership side of the business. So it really evolved over the, you know, and that's one thing I'd say about your business system is, you know, your business system, quite frankly, needs to evolve. It needs to be subjected to the Kaizen process, just like anything else does, right? So if it doesn't, then that's a problem. All right, so you have to keep thinking about how do you continue to improve your whole thinking, quite frankly, in your mindset, and of course your system. This is the Okay, Peter, can you see this now? This is the kind of a snapshot of operating metrics. I want to make sure I'm on the right page with you guys.
We can see a sort of overlay of 2 slides. We can see the strategy for world-class performance together with DBS fundamentals. They're sort of overlaid on each other.
So I don't know what's going. I'm not sure what's going on with the feed, because my screen right now just has a 20-year history of Danaher statistics with revenue, headcount. Okay.
Yeah, we've got that. I think the platform's not very stable today. So anyway, we've got the 20-year thing. So let's go. Yeah.
Okay. So again, not to go over all these numbers, but you can see what happened here. Danaher became, one of the most profitable companies on the planet relative to, the transformation, and a lot of credit was given to the Danaher business system. But I will tell you this: if it wasn't for the leadership combined with the Danaher business system, they're all intertwined, right? And so it's not just doing really well lean, because quite frankly, you could be a great company and you're making buggy whips, right? And you're not going to work that way. So you've got to be in the right businesses, the right industries. One of the things I always said about Toyota was they're in a lousy business. I mean, their average stock appreciation since 1997, I believe, has been about 6% per year, where Danaher has been over 20. Now, stock price alone does not mean that, you're a great company, because I know some companies that are unbelievably profitable and they're awful companies to work for because of their lack of respect for people. Okay, so financial performance alone does not make you a great company. However, if you don't have the financial performance, I can't call you a great company. Okay, that's just my personal view of the world, and that's just how I look at it. So I just want to do a check on every slide that I look at here. This is an iceberg. Does everybody?
We see an iceberg.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So what we always were looked at, and I think anybody can relate to this from their own personal successes or what have you, is nobody sees underneath all of the stuff that you have to put up with to be successful, right? There's a lot of setbacks and a lot of people give up, and all they see is the top beautiful part of the iceberg. But you have to remember that, the bottom of the iceberg is what sank the Titanic, right? And so that's, if you can't deal with the bottom of the iceberg, then you're not going to really have a really good showing on top. And so it's all the stuff that I want to talk about quickly, about the errors that we made that were, quite frankly, it either makes or breaks you, quite frankly. And so many people go astray when they hit these roadblocks, and everybody's going to hit these roadblocks, by the way. So I just want to keep that in mind, that success is not as easy and apparent as what might appear to the naked eye. So again, we have to break down silos. Number one, I almost wish there were no functions in a company, because there are silos, and everybody tries to make great functions, a great HR function, a great engineering function. No, we all need to work together to make a great enterprise. And believe it or not, as you try to make a great function, whatever it may be, you will sub-optimize the rest of the business. All right. So you have to work in concert with everything, everybody, every function. And that is why it's so important that everybody becomes schooled on the principles. I don't care if you're in sales, accounting, it doesn't really matter. Everybody has to walk the talk in that regard. And some of the biggest problems that we have is the non-operating areas that don't get on board. So for example, production control still wants to do their discrete work orders and not create single point scheduling. They don't want to move away from MRP. Finance still wants to do traditional cost accounting and standard cost accounting, and does not want to go to value stream costing, all kinds of things like that. We still want to batch our performance reviews every year. So it's just things like that, that if the enterprise isn't on the same page, it's going to be a problem. And that's one of the main reasons why people fail. So we initially focused on the shareholder. And what you're looking at here is something I call the lean trilogy. I hope you guys can see that. It says employees, shareholders, and customers. And if you only focus on the shareholder, you're going to lose. Okay, you will sub-optimize. All three of these groups have to win. All right, employees, customers, and shareholders. As a matter of fact, I would hold out that says if you focus on employees and customers. The shareholders will take care of them. You'll take care of them, blindly. You'll take care of them. They'll be fine. But so many things that we do are more cost focused, and we're looking at the shareholder as the only stakeholder in the game. And by the way, there's other stakeholders besides these, as your suppliers, society, the environment, all kinds of things, your community. There's other stakeholders as well, but these are some of the three of the key main ones that we have to consider. Okay, so all stakeholders must win. Okay. We put the most expendable people in key lean roles, because we didn't believe in it. Some of us didn't believe in it, and so we put people in roles that shouldn't have been there. They weren't the right people. It takes a really talented person to be really good at lean, not only from a technical perspective, but from an EQ, not only IQ perspective. Not everybody has that, and that's fine. But you really have to think about who you put in these roles, and don't just put the least expendable, in your opinion, in those roles, just so you can check the box for corporate that says, hey, we've got somebody in that role. Okay, it doesn't work that way. Okay, and I would suggest you put future leaders in these roles. Okay, and make it almost a part of their development plan, and that's exactly what we did. I actually had company presidents come work for me for 6 to 9 months, maybe a year. They didn't even know where they were going to go. They came in from the outside and they got schooled on DBS. And then when an opening came up with a new acquisition or whatever, we put them in, and they were already schooled in the Danaher business system. Not to say that their learning stopped, but they at least had a good indoctrination into it from a hands-on perspective. Okay, and again, I talked about this earlier, but if you're not thinking about your business strategy, okay, and aligning your lean transformations towards that business strategy, it's not a good thing. And what you really need to do, quite frankly, is decide what is it you're going to work on and what are you not going to work on. Okay, and so that's important, because you will diffuse yourself with your resources and just not focus on the things that are really meaningful, not only to your business but to your customer. Okay, so it's something that you really have to think about, and not get diverted into areas that do not really contribute towards the strategy. Okay, I have a rough number. I kind of don't like numbers like this, but I say roughly 2/3, 70%, whatever you want, of your lean initiatives should focus on your strategic breakthrough objectives, and the other 30% focus on daily management. Again, daily management are those things, that all those processes that you run on a day-to-day basis that you need to continue to improve through Kaizen, but they're not breakthrough processes. So for example, a new product development process that has a very long lead time might be a breakthrough for your company, so you can maintain or obtain a competitive advantage. Well, the accounts payable process might not be all that strategic. Does that mean you shouldn't try to improve it? No, you should, right? Because a lot of the fundamental daily management systems are sort of the platform for you to do breakthrough. And if you don't have those systems in check, they will drag you down with firefighting, and you won't be able to work on the business, because you'll continually be working in the business. Point Kaizen versus, I alluded to this earlier, versus enterprise Kaizen. Peter, I just want to do a check here. I'm on error 4. Do you guys see that?
We're still seeing takeaway roughly 70% slide.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah, error 4. We have it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. By the way, this is one of the reasons I don't use GoToMeeting anymore. But I've had a lot of problems with them. Error 4, mostly focused on point Kaizens versus enterprise Kaizen. Again, point Kaizens are those focused Kaizens, those Kaizens that, go into a department, you create a cell, you go into a function and work in an isolated, contained area, where an enterprise Kaizen is more broad-based. So for example, a good example of that would be a sales and operations planning process elicits all of the functions in a company. Okay, name one that it doesn't, including HR, including finance, including obviously manufacturing, engineering, marketing, sales. So that's an enterprise-wide endeavor that again, if all the players in those functions aren't understanding what we're doing, you're not going to do it. You're not going to be successful, right? So you need to do point Kaizen, but where a lot of people fail is they don't know how to do what I call enterprise Kaizen, okay, which is a real problem, okay? Era 5, again, I'm on Era 5 here, Peter. Hope you guys can see it. Focus on Muda and not enough on Mura and Miri. Okay, Muda are the traditional 7 ways of the Toyota production system, and I won't take a lot of time with that right now. But Mura, unevenness, and unreasonableness is Miri. Those are usually driven by policy. So for example, if we have a sales incentive system that just drives volume without, that incentivizes sales to push product to a customer when they don't need it, you're violating a bunch of principles, including just in time. So that creates all kinds of unevenness in a plant, for example, that's trying to do Hijinko level scheduling. So all of a sudden, I had one client that at the end of the quarter, they've got 30% of the orders on the last 2 days. Okay, so that created all kinds of costs, all kinds of headaches. The customer didn't need the product, but the sales guys wanted to get their commission. So that was an example of a policy that created all kinds of waste in the organization. So in that regard, the sales department won. They got their bonuses and they got their cruises and all their awards, but the enterprise lost. Not only did they lose because it had more cost, but they discounted the heck out of the product. So the whole margins were squeezed, and it wasn't a good day. And then the subsequent periods, they had to lay people off, which they shouldn't have done, but they laid people off because they had no work, because they bled out the pipeline. So it caused all kinds of unevenness and all kinds of waste in the organization. By the way, one thing I will say to you, that if you're starting a lean transformation, you've got to make, and I know this is very controversial, but you've got to make a no layoff policy, because you cannot lay people off when you ask them for their ideas, and you go from 8 people to 4, and those additional 4 people that you saved walk out the door. How's that going to work on your next Kaizen? You've got to have that. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't adjust your headcount over the course of time, but if you tie it back to lean improvements, you will shoot yourself in the foot, and you might as well just hang it up, okay? It doesn't really matter at that point. Okay. I'm on Era 6, Peter, attempting to financially justify everything. I'm an ex-finance guy, and I will be the first to tell you right now, finance guys could kill your initiative if you're not careful, because if they want to cost justify everything that you do, it's going to be a loser, all right? And there are just certain things that you can't cost justify. I tell people that, if you go to the gym and you spend 45 minutes on a treadmill, well, if you can't, show me data as to how that affected your cholesterol and how did that affected your heart health and your blood pressure, well, then you know what? You shouldn't work out, right? Is that the conclusion we're going to make, right? Well, lean's a lot like that. There are a lot of things that you need to do in lean that just aren't measurable in that regard. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be looking for measurable results. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that at all. But if every single thing has to go through an ROI, return on investment analysis, then that's just the wrong thinking right there altogether. Okay, and you will end up suboptimizing not only your business, but you will suboptimize your service to the customer, and also won't achieve your employee objectives, whatever they may be, because you're trying to just cost justify every single thing. So be careful on that one, okay? We don't run our businesses the same way we run our lives. I don't think anybody here goes out and buys 1 year's worth of inventory at the grocery store. You don't run your car around the block at night 1,000 times to get efficiency and utilization out of it, right? But we do these kind of things in business all the time. So a lot of times, because the way we're measured and the way we incentivize ourselves and compensate ourselves, we end up doing all kinds of crazy things that we normally would not do. Okay, so always think about how you run your own life, and then ask if it makes sense. Would I do this really in my own life? If the answer is no, you probably shouldn't be doing it in your business either, okay? We made the tools the objective. Right now on Era 7, Peter, just to make sure you're tracking with me, You know, the Danaher business system at one time became the objective. We became so enamored with it, right? And quite frankly, that's wrong, right? We should be enamored with the objectives of our employees and the objectives of our customers and our shareholders, right? Our key stakeholders. That's what we should become enamored with, not the tools. The tools are just an implement to, like I say, get the and your business system in general is a tool if you want to think about it, all baked with, you know, under the umbrella of philosophy and principles. Okay, so don't become enamored with the tools. That's not the objective. The objective is to satisfy your customer and the like, right? Okay. Leadership. This is an ongoing problem even today. Most leaders talk it, but they don't do it. Okay, and it's not a spectator sport. You've got to get involved. You've got to be hands-on. Okay, you have to have knowledge. You have to understand. You have to go out and actually be part of the transformation. So many CEOs call me and they say, "Hey, we want to do the Danaher business system." The first thing I say is, "No, you can't." Okay, you can't do the Danaher, and you can't do the Toyota production system. Okay, you've got to do your own system. You can benchmark off all these things and learn from best practices, but you've got to kind of create your own thing. However, you know, you can't do it. You know, what they're really asking me is, we want Danaher's results. They're not really, you know, willing to do the real work involved in the transformation, so they don't get involved. Okay, and they kind of, you know, talk a good game. They might give a couple, you know, seminars and all that, but they don't really get involved in transformation. Okay, so that's a problem. Okay, and when leadership views this as a spectator sport, then you know how that works, right? The other thing is, you know, as far as being hands-on, is that if you, you know, anybody here play golf, you cannot. I mean, I've read all the great golf books, you know, Hogan's 5 Lessons, and I've watched all the videos. You don't get better by doing that. You have to go out and do it. You have to swing the club, right? So lean is a hands-on game, and the only way you really learn is going out by doing it, and quite frankly, making mistakes, which is okay. Okay. So the whole idea is, you know, this is a biblical saying, but you want to be able to teach people how to fish, right? And so that they can self-sustain and improve over the course of time. You can't do it for them. So those of you out there that are in lean roles, make sure you're transferring not only explicit knowledge, which you can get from a book, but tacit knowledge, the hands-on knowledge as to how to do this, right? And a lot of that is self-discovery in a Kaizen event, where people learn from themselves with your facilitation and you asking the right questions, not giving them the answers. Okay, hard to do, especially for consultants, because consultants feel compelled to want to always give the answer. What a good consultant will do is ask you the right questions. Okay, safety, quality, delivery, and cost, in that order. That's a mantra. Okay, if you make decisions, this is a philosophy, if you are a principle, if you make your decisions based on this mantra, you'll be doing fine, because, you know, again, you're not going to ship a product or have a product produced, let's say, if safety is being compromised. Absolutely not. It's a stopper right there. To make a delivery commitment, I'm not going to ship bad quality. And if I'm late on a delivery, I am going to air freight it, okay, even though it's going to hit me in cost. Notice that cost is last. And as a matter of fact, you do the first 3 really well, cost takes care of itself, okay? And so many people don't understand that, and they all want to focus on cost. You focus on, you know, and safety is an element of quality, but we break them out here because I think it's warranted. But if you focus on quality, I mean, the cost of poor quality, I've done the math on a lot of different companies. The cost of poor quality could be anywhere from 15 to 25% of revenues. So once you get past all the basic stuff that everybody counts, like rework and scrap and warranty, and look at the real, true hidden cost of poor quality, it's up in that vicinity. So, you know, if you have a $100 million business, you're talking anywhere from 150 to, from 15 to $25 million of cost that you're incurring that hits the bottom line. Okay, so a lot of companies talk the game on SQDC, but typically it's more like CC, cost. All right, and so be careful that you don't fall into that trap. okay? And then, you know, like I say here, you cannot cost cut your way to prosperity. It's a loser. And then one last thing, we did not treat DBS as optional. We said, no, it's not up for debate. Okay, it's not up for debate. And now how you do it is going to be customized to your business and to your particular strategy and your situation. Everybody's different. So, you know, you have to, and there's no cookie cutter, by the way. You try to put together a cookie cutter approach that said, hey, here are all the steps you do to do lean. No, it doesn't work that way, okay? And there is no cookie cutter because every application, every company is different, okay? So we made this a non-negotiable and it worked out really well for us, okay? So you have to think about what your non-negotiables are as a business. You know, right now you have non-negotiables. I mean, for example, you cannot practice in sexual harassment. You can't practice in, you know, racial bias. You can't hit somebody. You can't harm somebody. Those are all non-negotiables. Well, what about the more subtle non-negotiables, right? So, you know, for example, we even got tactical on this. Like, for example, in cell design, and I don't want to talk about cell design today, but you know, we just prohibited chairs in a cell. There's a lot of reasons why you don't want chairs in a manufacturing cell, and I've heard all the reasons why we should. So we made that a non-negotiable. We weren't going to argue about that 200 times across the globe at all different facilities. We will spend time talking to you about why it's a bad idea, but it's not something that we're going to negotiate on. Okay, so and so that was a tactical one, but then we had some higher level ones too. For example, a process is not a process if it's not documented. That's a non-negotiable. Okay, so don't you dare call it a process if you did not document it. Okay, so things like that. So when you look at principles and tools, quite frankly, and I got some on here. This is just an example of some of them. Okay, bottom line is you have to have a process. Okay, and Peter, just to do a check here, are you looking at the principles page here?
Not quite yet. It tends to have a little lag. We're still on the George Sturman slide.
Okay, it's gonna come to you.
Yeah, it's that.
Okay. Yeah, there's a little bit of a delay here. The bottom line here is that your principles and values have to have an underlying process. So, for example, if you say to yourself, "Well, yeah, we really think that the leader's #1 job is to, you know, to develop their people," and my next question to you, okay, what's your process to do that? And oh yeah, by the way, how many people here have career development plans? Oh, geez, no, we don't have career development plans, but we really think, you know, developing people is really key. Okay, that's great. We really think that you know, solving problems at the lowest possible level in the organization is the right thing to do. Oh, that's great. Well, first of all, do you have a problem-solving process that you teach your employees, and have they been taught? No. Do you give them time during their work week to solve problems? No. And if you did give them time, do you give them the resources, whether it's engineering, maintenance, tooling, whatever, right? No. Well, then how is that going to happen? If you load everybody to attack time, all their available time to make product, and you don't give them the time to work on improving their process, how is that all going to happen? Okay. So what I would suggest that every single value and principle that you aspire to that's on your website, you must have a PDCA, Plan, Do, Check, Act, the Deming cycle, right? System in place to plan it, to do it, then check to see that it's being done, and then put the countermeasures in place on the act side when it's not. Okay, so again, values and principles without an underlying process are just slogans. Okay, so think about that as you guys go through. Okay, so bottom line, you are perfectly engineered to get the results that you've already gotten. Okay, and so if you like those results, don't change. But I can guarantee you, if you don't change, those results won't be there for long. Okay, so you know, this I put this slide in here because it's important to understand that that you know, things aren't going to get better if you don't change. Okay, and so many reasons why people will tell you why something can't get done I sort of have to look at it the other way and say, well, what does have to be done in order for us to, to achieve our stakeholder objectives? And again, that's not just the shareholder, that's customers, employees, right? Okay, so Peter, I think that's it. I don't know if I went over on my time, but
No.
I think that I went through it kind of fast. There's a lot more to this than what I sort of alluded to here, but I wanted to make sure you had enough time for the Q&A.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much, Mark, for doing that. So we've got a few questions starting to come in, so it'd be good to pose them through to you. So one or two were to do with the slides moving around, and once or twice I think we might have lost a slide or something like that. So one of the questions was whether or not we're going to be able to get a copy of the slides to people.
Oh, absolutely. I'll send Peter. I'll send that to you, Emma, and then you guys can distribute it. Okay.
Okay, we'll do that. So thanks for that. Okay, so question here from David. What do you see as the most important underlying skills management need to develop?
Well, I think every lean question is going to start with my answer of respect for people, okay? But once you get past that, I think a leader really needs to learn how to ask the right questions, okay? And that is fundamental. So many leaders have gotten to their positions because they were really good technically, and they always were the answer guy or lady, and it's asking questions because, and the reason for that, even if you know the answer, okay, it's important to have your people have that light bulb go on, and it might take some time. It might take 5 days for them to come up with the answer that you see on Monday. They may not get it until Friday, okay? But when that light bulb goes on, because you challenge them with the right questions, then they own that answer and they will remember it forever. If you tell them on Monday the answer, in 2 weeks they'll forget it, okay? But if you make them struggle and really think about it, and maybe wake up in a cold sweat at 2 a.m. in the morning, I don't mean that, but maybe that's not respect for people, but they'll own it and they'll never forget that lesson, okay? So knowing how to ask the right questions after we take care of the respect for people part, right, is a real key for leader. And it's really hard to do. It's really hard to do because everybody wants to be the smartest guy in the room, and they all want to give their answers as to what something. And by the way, a lot of problems, could be solved in so many different ways, Peter. So there's not always one optimal answer to a problem. So it's more important that your people own the problem, even if it's a less than perfect solution. And then they'll self-correct. They'll see that on their own. Okay, and sometimes you have to let your people make mistakes, and that's okay too, as long as you're not going to damage your customer or submarine the business. Sometimes give them a little attitude, but asking the right questions is the real key.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think that's quite important. I mean, I like the fact that you focused on the respect for people, because a lot of the errors that you highlight, I'm looking back and I probably made exactly the same errors probably at the same time as you, during the journey. And I reflect on the fact.
I just want to be real clear, Peter. I never made any of those errors. It was everybody else that did it, right? Okay, so.
Yeah. So, I mean, I remember, we were playing around with value stream mapping in the sort of mid-90s, and we said all you need to do is value stream mapping, and then we said you introduce policy deployment, and we came to the conclusion, unless you've actually got the local teams really doing lean properly with, what you're talking about is the daily management and the point Kaizen stuff. We use different names, but the same sort of thing. What you call the enterprise Kaizen doesn't really stick because it's got nothing to embed into, and hence it doesn't sustain particularly well. So that was an example of that one. But anyway,
I make a joke a lot of times. I say, it's not like you go to the store and buy a refrigerator, you bring it home, you plug it in, and 30 minutes later you've got ice cubes and cold drinks, right? It doesn't work that way. It's not that easy. Yeah. It's a lot of hard work, And so that's the thing that people don't understand. There's a lot of struggles, and all the books that you have out there, including mine, you know, there's a lot of complexity in every single business. I don't care what you do. You can make, you know, you can make pencils, and it's a complex business. And all the books, you know, the value stream mapping books and all the tools, they're all nice, easy, clean examples. But it's not, that is not the real world. There's a lot of complexity in our world, and so you have to learn how to deal with that on a priority basis, by the way, because if you try to get everything under the umbrella under one transformation, you know, we had the saying, one of the sayings that we had was, don't let perfect get in the way of better. So, you know, if I'm going to get 70% of it, fine, let's go get that. We'll get the other 30% later, but don't stop because of the last 30%.
Sure. So was that, were those principles DPS principles you put forward, or are they your own thoughts?
There's some of my favorite principles that I like. They're my own thoughts, but a lot of them did resonate out of what we did at Danaher. And I've got another presentation, Peter, that talks about principles, and I'd be happy to share that with you guys too. So I could send that. I talk about that. Yep.
Okay, so we'll share a few resources. You've already shared with Emma and I a paper you wrote comparing with Toyota, so we'll share that around as well. Thank you. Okay, another question here from David. Could you share the examples of the best implementation and the worst implementation you've witnessed?
Oh, wow. The best implementation. Well, I really don't care what anybody says about what's best or what's worse. I think the people that have to answer that question are the stakeholders. Okay. I could sit here and say that, you know, wire mold was one of the best implementations, which I believe it was, with Art Byrne, okay, who's a friend, and matter of fact, Art wrote the forward to my book here, right? But who am I to say that was the best? I'm not their customer, okay? So I think it's really important, you know, this, and why I'm bringing this up is because, you know, I've been to some I've been to some plants, some suppliers in Japan. You know, I've studied in Japan so many times, and you know, Peter, going to Toyota is really great, but going to the suppliers is even better. Okay, and we were in one company one time that had there was a Toyota supplier, and the argument that we were having, I had 30 Danaher executives over there with me. I took them over. We did this a number of times over the years. We were arguing whether or not this plant was turning inventory 300 or 700 times. Okay, now you can look at that. You can look at one-piece flow. You can look at inventory turns. You can look at all the different metrics, right? But what if they disrespect their people? Then it's not a good implementation, okay? So a lot of times people talk about good implementations in that regard. Oh, Lord, they took the inventory turns to 180, or they, you know, they improved profitability, like the charts I showed you there. I could tell you some companies, and probably one of the worst, and I can't mention the name, of course, is a foreign company that I worked with. It's actually a non-manufacturing company that just disrespected their people, and you know what the biggest problem was, Peter? They did, or David, I should say, because he asked the question. The biggest problem was they didn't recognize they were doing it, even after they, you know, all this was pointed out to them by me and others. Okay. And I had to fire that client, and by the way, they were so profitable, okay, unbelievably profitable, despite themselves. They had processes that were a mess, and it didn't matter, okay. But the culture and the disrespect, and by the way, so you know, you've got to really frame up what you mean by success, okay. You can't just look at one element and say, hey, they're successful, all right. And if all stakeholders, I would just say this to you, if all stakeholders are not giving you the thumbs up, then it's not successful. Okay, it's simple as that. And in this company, all the metrics, all the financials, the stock price, everything was going in the right direction. But it was a horrendous place to work, and it was not a successful company in my opinion. So I think you got to frame what you mean by success before you even answer that question.
Good. Okay, thanks. I mean, just on your point about the Toyota supply chain, that's actually how I did a lot of my learning of lean. I spent 3 months working with the Toyota supply chain in Japan, benchmarking their suppliers against the equivalent in Europe, and actually understanding how this works. And the average stock turn we found in direct Toyota suppliers in 1994 was 1, as in 1 a day. So it was a once a day turnover of materials. So we went into one company, and they apologized that their stock turn was so poor. It took a day and a half, and they said Toyota insists on us holding so much spare parts. So they had a day and a half worth of stock in the whole system.
It's a different world. Well, let me tell you a quick story, Peter, to go along with that. Okay, so when I was general manager of the Asian business for Danaher for Jake Break, before I went into the DBS office and did it for them, Hino Motors was one of my customers, right? And we did the first 3, and Hino is part of Toyota, right? The diesel engine company and truck company, and they were my customer. And we were shipping Jake Brakes from Connecticut in the United States all the way to Hino City in Japan. And we did a 3P line with Nikao, 3P line. He's the father of moonshine, and the first 3P line was on my Hino line. We had, it was an unbelievable line, and what learning we had. So not only did I have the Hino engineers, but I had Nikao, and we had 0 defects, 0 warranty, 100% on-time delivery to request date, everything, the right metric. So when so my first trip over there, I said, oh, well, they're going to roll out the red carpet to me, right? For me. And so they're going to feed me sake, they're going to have bands playing, everybody's going to be patting me on the back. So I walked into the purchasing office for the diesel engine group, and they had a big list on the wall from ceiling to floor of their suppliers. There were 110 of them, and that's all they had for the diesel engine, and we were one of them. And they were ranked from the best to the worst, okay, top 1 to 110. So I'm looking up on top of the list, real arrogant, right? I'm looking up on top of the list. I'm saying to myself, oh, we got to be up there, right? Because we're so damn good. And I'm looking at the list, and I don't see my name. And then, dummy me, I said, well, oh, they wrote it all in kanji characters, so that's why I don't understand that. That's why I know I'm up there, right? Well, I looked down the list. We were number 106. And I'm like, wait a minute. How the heck are we number 106? 100% on-time delivery to request, 0 defects, nothing, right? So I got in a meeting. They said, DeLuzio, son, because of the 12-hour time difference, you're not always as responsive as we want you to be. And also, your labels on your boxes are not always in the same place because we put them on manually. And maybe one time they were 1/4 inch from the top, and one time it was 1/8 of an inch or whatever, right? And it's like, they're not. And I said, well, wait a minute. So I gave the dumb answer. I said, that's not form, fit, or function. What do you care about the label? And you know what the response was? They said, DeLuzio, son, if you cannot guarantee the quality on the outside of the box, how can you guarantee the quality on the inside of the box? And it's a total different mindset dealing with those guys, okay? Total different mindset, all right? And it's a big deal. Those kind of things are, but I will say this, even with disrespect for people, look for the little things, because the little things usually lead to bigger things. And you have to, like, you make an appointment with your doctor and they can get the appointment right. Well, he's going to do brain surgery on me? I don't think so, So anyway.
Yeah, many people say judge a restaurant by the restrooms rather than the menu.
No question.
Anyway, I'm going to move on. There's a few questions coming in. So, okay. So one's from my friend Costas here. So he says, hello, Mark. Thank you for the great presentation. In your opinion, does a centralized lean organization help or hinder the organization from owning the lean journey?
Well, when you talk about owning a lean journey, that almost seems like it's a program, right? It almost seems like it's an IT system or something, and I even reject the whole thought process of that. Somebody has to own it. You really have to live it. And, ideally, the central lean office, to me, and I wrote a paper on this, and I will share that with you as well, should really be more about transfer of tacit knowledge, okay, and that type of thing, and doing the training and learning and all that. But ultimately, you almost want to work that central office out of a job because you want all 5,000 people in your organization to be lean thinkers, right? You don't want to just have a group that says, hey, I'm a black belt, or I'm a, you know, and I'm the guy that's the lean guy. Well, why isn't everybody a lean guy? Okay, from the CEO down to the janitor. All right, so ultimately, you know, it could be a hindrance in a lot of different ways if it's misused. All right, because I've seen companies, and matter of fact, one of them was my client, where they did not view that central lean office did not view the rest of the company as their customer. Matter of fact, it was quite frankly reversed 180 degrees, where everybody's had to report into them, and they weren't helpful. Okay, they weren't helpful. They were distraction, quite frankly, and so that office became a corporate overhead function that just distracted the heck out of everybody. Okay, and they couldn't figure out while they were sitting in their offices all day with the phone not ringing. You know, if you turn that around and you say, hey, look, I'm gonna be here to help you, but one of the key things with a central lean office is if you're going in and doing it for somebody, that's the wrong answer. You've got to go in and have them do it. You got to facilitate them doing it so that the tacit knowledge gets transferred. Okay, and they have to learn it. And by the way, I would always insist that a leader participates in anything that you do. You know, it can't just be the frontline associates with leaders not being involved. Because a lot of times I would get called, and here's my principles on this. The first thing I would say is, how does this tie into your strategy deployment? Okay, am I going to come in and work on something that's not meaningful to you? So that's not a good answer. And then secondly, what leadership of your team is going to be involved in this hands-on? And I don't mean somebody come in and observe. Okay, I never allowed observers. Okay, you can't learn by observing. Go to a golf tournament and try to watch Tiger Woods. Is that going to make you a better golfer? No. Okay, so I would kick presidents out if they would come. I'm just going to observe today. You know, no, you're not. No, you're not. Get out. Okay, so if you're not transferring knowledge and view people as your customer, and you're a big overhead structure that they have to report into, I could tell you right now that's a kiss of death. I don't know if that answers your question, but you know, ultimately you want that office to go away where everybody is, but you always have people. Learning, new acquisitions, new people coming in. So there's always a need to get people trained. But the lower you can push that down in the organization, the better.
I think it's very useful. Costas is actually the head of the global lean for his organization. So obviously this is something that he's reflecting on, and how does that work and what is the role. So thank you for that.
You know, if you want to talk more, Costas, please, you know, feel free to reach out to me, and I could fill you in with all my wisdom. It'll take about 5 minutes, but.
Okay, well, that's enough for you, Costas. Okay, a few more questions. So one from my new friend here, aside, which follows on, I guess, from the last question, is probably the most frequent question we get on these webinars is, how do you get the senior leadership to walk the talk?
Well, I think if you even have to ask that question, you need to look for another job. I mean, how are you going to get the senior? I mean, if they're not going to get involved, okay, if you're trying to do this from the middle of the organization and try to convince somebody to do it, okay, well, I think that's like pushing a rope uphill. I don't even think there's an answer for that. I really don't. Okay, and this is one of the reasons why a lot of this fails, because I just reject the whole idea that you even have to think that way, and that you even have to go through convincing somebody above you, you know. And so I don't know. I mean, you know, this is not 1990. Okay, this world, and you know, the Western world and Europe, and you know, we all been doing this now for 30 years. And it's incredulous to me that leaders are just brand new to this and have never even heard of it. It's like, where have you been? You know, so I just think that is almost I haven't seen it done very well, if at all. So if you're in a position where you've got to convince somebody, then what you're doing is focusing on your leaders and not focusing on your customer. Okay, and you will lose. You will not win that game. Okay, so I just don't think that's a good thing at all, and I don't have an answer for it, how to do it, because I don't think it can be done.
I think it's a difficult one. I mean, it's difficult if you're, that middle manager. And I mean, my own answer to this one is get them out, try and persuade them to go and visit some folk where this has happened, and get them to talk to the senior leaders there that have taken ownership. That's probably the only thing that I can suggest that that might be a breakthrough.
Yeah, we would do that, Peter, with acquisitions, and that was successful. That's why we did all the trips to Japan. I've done like a half dozen of those with Nikao and Iwata, and that does help. Okay, but let me tell you this: I don't care where you are, if it's an existing company or a new acquisition or whatever, there'll be 10 or 15% fallout of people who don't get it, and there'll be naysayers, and those naysayers usually are not the people on the shop floor. Okay, they're sitting in the boardroom. And those are the naysayers. And if a CEO does not recognize and do something about those naysayers, then that CEO by default becomes a naysayer himself or herself, and it won't work. I'm telling you, because all you have to have is, if you have a CFO, for example, that's just fighting this and wants to do traditional stuff, it's not going to work. You'll spend all your time fighting and not really making meaningful change. And then all of a sudden you get into the old ROI thing where you have to now cost justify everything and show somebody on paper how come this is a good idea. And I haven't seen it work very well. I'm sorry. If you're in that position, I feel bad for you, but that's tough. That's really tough.
Okay, I've got one comment and two more questions. So perhaps we'll do that and then we'll sort of wind up. So I'll do the comment from Michelle here. Michelle says, asking questions is also showing a sign of respect to employees, isn't it? I think it's more a comment than a question as such.
What was the first part of that, Peter?
Asking questions is also showing a sign of respect to employees, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's a good insight, Michelle, whoever you are. Because what you're saying is, oh, wow, my boss really thought it was important that he would ask me what I thought, Absolutely.
Yeah.
As opposed to, I'm going to tell you.
A him, Michelle, rather than a her, Michelle.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna just go on to the last two questions. So Stephen, who works with smaller companies over there in Northern Ireland, so he's asking, can you scale this to smaller organizations, and would you have the same obstacles, or would you change the system, the sequence, depending on the maturity of level of engagement in the organization?
Well, I'm not going to answer that question unless he invites me over to have a Guinness in Ireland. So then I'll answer it then. How's that? I love Ireland, by the way. And I don't think it changes at all. I mean, I think if you just fundamentally think about the principles, Stephen, and you think about the focus on your customer, and nothing changes. I mean, nothing changes at all. And it's interesting that people say, well, Danaher was a multi-billion-dollar company, and we're not a multi-billion-dollar company. Yeah, but Danaher is made up of all these 40, 50, 60, 70 million dollar companies. So I'm not sure what is considered small, but I've seen this work on very small organizations, $5, $10 million organizations. And I've seen it work on multi-million, multi-billion-dollar companies. So I think the principles are the same. And when you talk about a sequence, there's really no sequence here. That's what I said earlier. There's no playbook, right? And there's no playbook at all, in my opinion. It's almost like saying, you're going to go to the doctor and they're going to give you the exact same formula of treatment as they're going to give somebody else, right? It doesn't work that way. Everybody's different. Everybody has different challenges, whether they're quality or safety or whatever, and financial, and you really can't say there's a sequence or process to follow. You have to really adapt through experience how best to approach a certain company, certain situation. So, but no, it applies to any size business. So I don't see a big difference.
Okay, well, I've got one more, so there's two more. We'll do that. The next question actually links quite to what you were talking about. Is from Gina, who this sequence thing. So she's saying a lean transformation is a big thing. How do you know where to start? Would that be with a strategy that you were talking about earlier?
Well, yeah. Okay. Well, let me give you a case study that I'm working on right now. Okay. I've got a company that we just started working with, big company, and they expected me to come in and say, hey, we're going to put in strategy deployment. All right. Well, they need strategy deployment, but the first problem is they don't have a strategy. Okay. So it's hard to deploy something that you don't have, right? But when you look at the fundamentals, and we did this with new acquisitions that didn't have a strategy, we looked at safety, quality, delivery, and cost, and we tried to find what the real fundamental things were that we had to focus on in that regard. And many times, the right answer is to look at your customer, okay, and say, what is your customer saying to you? Why did you lose those quotes? Everybody, by the way, defaults to, oh, our costs were too high. Well, then, first of all, that's a problem because you shouldn't be pricing on cost, but you should do it on market. But anyway, another subject for another day. But that is usually not the reason why people lose quotes. It's not cost. It's something else, whether it's lead time, quality, whatever, right? So starting with your customer, what's your customer telling you? Okay, and start working on those things on a priority basis, by the way, because you can't just, what I'm saying. So that's
right,
what I would do. But once you get your strategy in place, you'll be able to. But you have to get your fundamentals. You have to get your fundamentals down first. And we had a saying at Danaher that you had to earn the right to grow. You could not grow if your safety, quality, delivery, costs were in such disarray that you were going to end up messing up something else down the line. Okay, so anyway, that's my answer to that. It's everybody likes to start with a tool to say, what tool do you start with? The first question is, where are you going to start? Because a company has many parts to it, and I could say, well, start with value stream mapping. Well, what are you going to value stream map? And how are you going to think about that? So many times you already know the answer. Like this one company I'm talking about, they already know there's 3 key areas that they have to focus on, and they don't need strategy deployment to tell them that right now. All right. We will use PDCA to track it and all that stuff, but we don't need to go through all the wallpaper right now to be able to get fancy about it because we already know. So be very practical about it.
Very good. Okay, so we're gonna so David says the last question. So David says, when you put safety first, I see that as both physical and psychological safety. Respect for people contributes towards psychological safety. Did you see a respect for people shift at Danaher during the transformation? If so, could you share how that happened and what impact did it have?
Yeah, it did shift, and sometimes it didn't shift in the right direction, by the way, depending on what kind of leaders we brought in. A lot of this is leader-centric, and again, we did not have, let me go back a little bit. Remember when I talked about your principles and your values should have a process associated with it? We weren't always really good at that in the early days, although we did, like 50% of my performance reviews that I did for my people had to do with our values, okay? And the rest were technical, okay? And results driven, right? So that is a way, for example, to do, PDCA in that regard. But I will say this, that, it's depending on where you were and who you work for in Danaher or any company for that matter, that, that really, the only person that can answer that question is the employee, right? And the person that is in that environment. So, if I sit here and say, oh yeah, well, we really shifted and we really got better at this, well, there could be somebody out there sitting there saying, oh my God, it was awful. I hated working at Danaher. I hated working for, John Smith or whoever. And a lot of people leave companies not because of the company, they leave because of leaders, right? And so we weren't always pure in that regard. So, I think overall we had a relatively blameless environment. We were pretty good at that. We weren't great at it. Nobody's great at it, but we wanted to focus more on the process and not on the person who made the mistake. And so that was what we tried to aspire to. Were we always successful? No. After I left, Larry Culp took over. I worked with Larry for quite a while. He's now, chairman and CEO of GE. So he had a little bit different style than George Sherman, but overall, The Danaher business system still grew under Larry, and so did Danaher. And so, you know, I think it depends on your perspective and who you are and what leader you work for. So it's not always a clear answer to say that a organization shifted, you know, because depending on what part of the organization you work, there might be a good story, or it may not be that good of a story.
Sure. Well, I think time's against us here, Mark. So I think we'll wrap things up there. So I see that it's actually light there, so that's fantastic. You can have your dinner now. Now it's light. So thank you for that. That was really good, and I particularly like, you know, the errors and sharing that, and it's good to learn from why things don't work as well as they do.
Yeah,
and
let's just be clear, Peter. I didn't make any of those errors. It wasn't me. Okay?
Yeah, well, I hear that, and I particularly like the, you know, the focus on respect for people. So just flagging up to those of you listening, we're going to follow up on that theme. We've actually got 3 more talks coming over the next few weeks, but the one that's 4 on that we haven't yet put on marketing through is actually on that theme of respect. A guy called Paul Marciano, who wrote a book called Carrot and Sticks Don't Work about 10 years ago, who basically looks at principles of how you can get that respect to work. So he's a psychologist. So I think that will nicely sort of twin in with the sort of thing that we've been hearing from Mark in this session. So thank you very much, Mark. And so Emma, shall I pass to you for wrap us up for the day?
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Thank you very much, Mark, for a great presentation. And thank you, everyone, for joining. You'll receive a follow-up email with the webinar recording, as well as some feedback, which is always useful for us. And as Mark mentioned, we will distribute the slides to you as well. Okay, thank you very much. Have a nice day, everyone. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Peter. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Emma. Thanks, Peter. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye. Bye. Have a good day. Have a good weekend.